Is it on?
It's on. It says it's on. Hello? I'm not getting anything. Hello? Hello? I'm not getting, it's on, but I'm not getting anything.
Hello.
I guess I have to yell. Can everybody hear me? A little louder. Can you hear me now? I feel like I'm on a commercial here. Well, good evening and welcome back for a new year here at the International Club of Annapolis. Tonight, we have a little different presentation. We usually feature speakers who focus on a country or a geographic area or a people group somewhere in the world. But tonight, our speaker, Dr. Gordon Roesler, will be taking us out of this world, at least temporarily. And he's going to come and speak to us and focus on international issues involving outer space and space exploration. I learned from him in just a short conversation that there are a lot of issues, international issues, relating to space exploration. Dr. Gordon Roesler is an internationally recognized authority in applying robotic technologies to space missions. And if you don't understand what that means, hopefully by the end of his presentation, you will. As president of Robots in Space, LLC, he advises industry, government, and academia on space infrastructure and business concepts for applications, logistics, advanced missions, and new markets. He led the space programs at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, commonly referred to as DARPA, the University of Southern California, and the University of New South Wales. The space robotics system that he created at DARPA is expected to launch next year.
New system. Okay,
New system. We have a new system, so we can expect just maybe a little.
Okay, you can talk on.
Okay. He helped the nation of Australia to develop a space robotics control center in Perth that was commissioned in 2022. His op-ed, "Let's Build a Superhighway in Space," describes a vision for a logistics infrastructure that between Earth and the Moon that would provide opportunities for international collaborations as well as maintaining the U.S. advantage in space. He's consulted with the Defense Innovation Unit, NASA, and numerous aerospace corporations. He's a 1975 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and also received a PhD in physics from MIT. He has 11 years of experience as a nuclear submarine officer and 10 years as a naval research intelligence officer. So, I think he's well qualified to talk about this subject this evening. Would you please give him a warm welcome?
Thank you very much. I know you're not used to having techno geeks talk here, but I'll try to keep the geekiness down as best I can. Thank you really for having me and stimulating me to change my talk in a kind of a new direction. And thank you, Ernie, for getting me wired up.
And Tom Ryan, our super genius that helped me. Okay.
So as you all know, the space age began in 1957 with the launch of this spacecraft, Sputnik 1, by the Soviet Union. The sphere is about 23 inches in diameter, so that's kind of big. And, those 4 antennas transmitted radio signals that could be heard by pretty much any amateur radio person in the world. And as you may remember, this caused tremendous political upheaval in the United States. It made it seem as though we were behind and that sort of thing. A month later, the United States tried to launch a probe and the rocket blew up on the pad. Senator Lyndon Johnson even had committee hearings to understand why we were failing and falling behind the Soviet Union and that sort of thing. So Sputnik was a major embarrassment for the administration. However, there is a silver lining for the United States that I'll explain in a minute. So 1957, 3 months later, we successfully launched our first spacecraft, Explorer 1. That's the one on the left. There's Werner von Braun is the one who's closest to us. He was responsible for launching, and then there are two for actually developing the spacecraft. But what President Eisenhower knew was that in development was a spy satellite called Corona. You can see the size of it. It dwarfs Sputnik or Explorer 1. The two rectangles are camera ports, and that bulbous nose is actually a re-entry vehicle. The film was transferred with a bunch of gears into the nose cone, which then re-entered through the heat of the atmosphere. A parachute opened, an airplane grabbed it out of the sky, and that film was taken and processed, giving incredibly valuable information on developments within the Soviet Union that we couldn't get any other way. And obviously, President Eisenhower also wanted to do away with the U-2 flights, and he authorized one too many. So the silver lining of Sputnik was that there was no legal consensus on overflight of nation states by orbiting satellites. But by not protesting the overflight of the United States by Sputnik, the standard was established that overflight is acceptable. And so we were then able to fly advanced intelligence gathering satellites without protest over the Soviet Union. So that was the silver lining that, now, the space activities right after this just exploded. So many different missions, so many different satellites, some of which were successful, some of which failed. By 1967, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 was signed. Has many, many provisions. I'll talk about a couple of them. It is still the governing international agreement on space activities. And it has some gaps, and I'll talk about some of those too. But though that treaty basically permitted all of the space activity that's happened since then, it laid the foundation for it, including the landings on the moon. And so this is all some of the early stuff. It is hard to overstate the benefits that humanity has received from our activities in space. How many thousands of lives have been saved because we can accurately track hurricanes from space and warn and evacuate people? Except if they refuse to leave. We all benefit from satellite communications, probably more than you know. Certainly television, but every time you use a credit card and a remote machine, it's going back to the bank via satellite. Data transfers. Satellites enable our military to be in continuous communication wherever they are around the world. It's been said that 90% of what we know about the Earth's climate comes from NASA satellites. This happens to be 1 year's production of carbon dioxide mapped by the Orbiting Carbon Observatory. And there are many, many other findings that have come from space that give us a much more detailed understanding of the climate than any terrestrial measurements have done. And then, of course, astronomy and astrophysics, right? The Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, several others in other frequency bands, for example, gamma ray observatories, X-ray observatories that have taught us much more about the universe and its evolution. Most of these systems were developed by the United States, and the data is shared freely with all nations, which I think you would agree is a diplomatic advantage. There's another system that I don't really know how to picture up here, but it's GPS, which of course was originally developed to improve the targeting for weapon systems. And now And listen, it's not just how do I get through the traffic jam at rush hour. Our entire economy would collapse if GPS were to go away. Every financial transaction is timed through GPS, every cell phone call. The Air Force once made a mistake. They uploaded the wrong data to a GPS satellite, threw the timing off, and they corrected the error in 6 seconds, which was estimated to cost $1 billion in lost cell phone calls and financial transactions and other things. So GPS, once again, built by the United States, provided to the entire world, and is an absolute mainstay of our economy. Not much of my talk is actually going to have to do with human spaceflight, but here is the most incredible engineering feat of the 20th and 21st centuries, the International Space Station, which does have a Russian module on it. And Sharon posed this question to me that I absolutely can't answer, which is, well, if we can cooperate with the Russians on the space station, why can't we do it anywhere else? I don't know.
That's a different job.
Took about 20 space shuttle flights to bring all the pieces up. I had a boss who flew up there 3 times, and she later became the deputy administrator of NASA. She just finished her tour there when the new administration changed. There's some incredible stories. And what we're really doing here is we're learning what we're going to need to be able to do for deep flight deeper into space, to go to Mars, to go to Europe, or whatever. This is, supplies are brought to the space station by the US, by Russia, by Europe, and by Japan. They all have specialized vehicles, and humans are brought to and from the space station only by Russia with its Soyuz capsules, and the United States with the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. But this is the sort of training ground for our moving humanity deeper into space.
Can you show us the parts of the space station where people are in that picture?
It's a T. You see it like that? That's all hollow, and there are humans in there. But most of the talk is going to have to do with uncrewed, unmanned spacecraft. This is a typical one that's in geostationary orbit that is for data, television, financial transactions, whatever, going out to geostationary orbit and coming back. There are about 400 of these. 300 are commercial and 100 are owned by governments. They are in an orbit that is regulated by the International Telecommunications Union. You must have a permit from them, a license to go into that orbit. And if you don't follow their rules, they will take your license away, and that's an enormous financial penalty. Each one of these probably produces $1 billion a year in revenue. You notice they have very large solar panels, and they have a bunch of pie-shaped antennas that stick out. These are all folded up during launch. They have to fit inside the nose cone of the rocket. Now, what if somebody told you that I want to make you the project manager for a $500 million asset? I don't know whether it's a shopping mall or a ship or whatever. But in its lifetime, you can never inspect it, you can never maintain it, you can never repair it, and you can never upgrade it, right? Would you take the job? But that's what we have here. So the reliability of these things, the engineering that goes into them is incredible. Around 2002, somebody got the idea, well, is there a way to change that picture? Could we use robots in order to do things for these satellites, even the ones that haven't been specially designed to be serviced? And there aren't many of those. So this is an early sort of artist concept. Notice the big fuel tanks and the strong arms. So this project was actually named SUMO, which stands for Spacecraft for the Universal Modification of Orbits. And it has nothing to do with the fact that my name is pronounced Roesler.
Who was it that had this idea?
Yeah, some guy. By 2017, we had done hardware development, we'd done software development, detailed design, manufactured arms and systems. So this is a pretty accurate look at what the robot would have looked like at that point in time. And then, now here's a guy standing in front of what I really wanted to show you. But that box in the back with the two gold-wrapped arms is a complete robotic system. Those two arms are 8 feet long. There's computers and radios and cameras and all sorts of things all in there in order to enable a satellite to go out and inspect and repair and upgrade other satellites. And this is in the high bay at Northrop Grumman right now, and it should launch in March. Should have launched 4 years ago, but you know, things change. This is a large object. I mean, you can see a human down here. You get the idea of the size of this. The solar panels, like in that satellite I showed you, are folded up on the sides, as are the antennas. I hope I'm invited to the launch. So, what can we do for systems in space today? This object, which you may recognize, was serviced 5 times by astronauts. 4 of those times they replaced instruments, and so they maintained it scientifically relevant. Right? Now these happen to be all American astronauts. So it's been providing amazing imagery from space for 25 years. Now, roughly to scale, that is the James Webb Space Telescope. Its mirror is 3 times the diameter of Hubble, so it has about 10 times the light gathering power. But it's 2 million miles away from Earth, and so it was never designed to be serviced, to have instruments upgraded and that sort of thing. So at some point, it will lose its scientific relevancy. Well, what if we could not only fix that problem by sending robots up there to service it, but what if we could actually build it with robots? So that means that we're no longer constrained by the size of the nose cone, right? We could put this thing together. That mirror could be 8 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters, 20 meters in diameter, and really enable us to look out there and see if there are living things beyond here. This is part of a NASA study. NASA has said their next telescope will be serviceable, so they realized that the James Webb telescope was going to be life limited because of the lack of servicing. As long as we're talking about space, we have to talk about launch. So this is a picture of one of the Falcon 9 rockets from SpaceX that have launched almost 500 times with 1 failure. Wow. And what does that mean? You know, they also recover the first stage. It comes back down and sits on its tail. Well, it means that over the years, the cost of launch has come way down. This looks like a very gentle slope until I point out that this is a logarithmic chart. So it means that in the past 50 years, the cost of getting things in orbit has come down by a factor of almost 100. Well, why does SITI say that it's going to come down by another factor of 10 in the next 15 years? Because of that. So that's the first stage of SpaceX's Starship re-entering and being captured by the mechanisms on this tower. And they'll be rapidly turned around and reused. So with lowering costs means more opportunities, more entrepreneurship, more things going on in space. So this is very exciting. That rocket can deliver 100 to 150 tons to Earth orbit, 10 times what today's rockets can deliver. So, like I said, with costs coming down, means we can do more things. On the left is a map of SpaceX's Starlink constellation, 6,400 spacecraft that are providing internet services around the world, including many disadvantaged countries. My wife, briefly with the Millennium Challenge Corporation, went to Mongolia. Mongolia is very interested in satellite communications because it's so sparsely populated and very, very difficult to reach. So that kind of thing is possible because of the decreased launch cost. On the right is a conception of one way of implementing this administration's Golden Dome concept. So this is missile defense on steroids. This is protection of the continental United States against ballistic missile attack. There are some parts of the system that are ground-based, some parts of the system that are space-based. Of course, we all remember the Strategic Defense Initiative of the Reagan years, Star Wars, and it was mocked at the time for two reasons. One of them is, well, you just can't control that many satellites. And, well, there just isn't enough computing power. What has happened to computing power in the last 40 years? Right? Not a problem anymore. Not a problem. So some version of Golden Dome is probably going to come to pass, and it's very technically feasible. Okay, let's go beyond Earth orbit now. I'm just using the moon as a representation of destinations. Humanity is inevitably going to expand into the solar system. The only question is the timeline. The US and China are vigorously working on putting humans back on the moon. The US has the Artemis program, which had one flight back a couple of years ago. The second flight may happen next year. And the third flight, which would be the actual humans landing on the moon, is somewhere in the late 2020s. China, on the other hand, has announced that they will have humans on the moon in 2030. And there's a huge difference between the Chinese space program and the US space program. The Chinese meet their deadlines. So if we're not aiming for 2030 or thereabouts, we're going to be number 2 back to the moon. I mean, another way of looking at it is, oh, we beat them there by 50 years. But there's a concern about China and its activities, which is they have been talking about making the moon an exclusive economic zone. Not sovereignty, which would violate the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, but an exclusive economic zone, just like they're doing in the South China Sea. Right? So taking over waters that also belong to the Philippines and Vietnam and so forth. We don't want to just put boots on the ground and then come home again. We want to stay on the moon for a while. So this is a European habitat concept from the company Thales Alenia. You can see it could easily fit on one launch vehicle and arrive there. But the problem with it is it doesn't provide protection against radiation from solar storms. What you really need to do is you need to use moon dirt and build some shielding. So here we have a robot that has dug up a bunch of moon dirt, the technical term for moon dirt is regolith, and covered the habitat to provide shielding in case of a large radiation event coming from the sun. Further out in the future, we can imagine large colonies. This one takes advantage of inflatables in order to make habitats. But there will be shielded areas inside of this where people could retreat in the event of a major solar accident, emission, I should say. The company Lockheed Martin has done an extensive survey or study of what would a lunar colony look like that was actually economically productive. Very extensive, very large survey. They even have a thing you can order online, it's called a novella. And they do it in kind of a fictional form, but they talk about how could you actually get a return on this investment. So on the right-hand side, you see some mining going on in a crater, whether they're mining water ice or metals or whatever. You have launch pads, and they have protected berms around them, and on the left, you have roads and habitats. Some is powered by nuclear reactors, some is powered by solar power. Very extensive study and compelling. I was actually part of an earlier study, 2018, called the Commercial Lunar Propellant Architecture, and this showed that under, myself and 25 others, under certain circumstances, there is a positive return on investment within a few years simply from mining the water ice at the lunar poles that we now know exists and turning it into hydrogen and oxygen. rocket fuel. So now we'll talk about some diplomacy stuff that's going on. The advent of astro-political alliances. Did you ever think you'd hear that word? In Trump 1, the concept was developed of what's called the Artemis Accords, which are a series of best practices, international norms, and that sort of thing that include sort of mining activities on the moon. It is completely in accord with the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. It's not attempting to rewrite that. It is filling in some of the holes. One of the big holes is the Outer Space Treaty says no nation may declare sovereignty over a celestial body. It says nothing about private entities. Right? So, is it okay? Is it not okay? So the Artemis Accords say it is okay, but there are certain strictures that you need to, I need glasses for this, there's a lot. So once again, no nation may declare sovereignty over a celestial body. Activities on celestial bodies must maintain transparency, interoperability, provide emergency assistance, register space objects, release scientific data, preserve heritage sites like the Apollo sites, and do sustainable and safe resource utilization. 56 nations so far, this is a very recent slide, have signed the Artemis Accords. China has their own sort of regime. It's called the ILSI, International Lunar Settlement Initiative, or something like that. They have a few nations that have signed up there as well. I think India may have signed both. No surprise. One of the things that the Artemis Accord specifies is if there's an economic activity going on, let's say on the moon, there will be a safety zone that all the other signatories are obliged to respect and that sort of thing. That's not the same as property rights. There is no property rights regime for celestial bodies. It does not exist. There is a group in The Hague, at the University of Leiden. It's a working group to try to create a framework from which we could eventually go forward and establish a celestial body property rights regime. We're not even close yet. And what investor in a mining company or an oil and gas company would put any money into a project if they didn't own the mineral rights? That's crazy, right? So that property rights regime is really important for getting this expansion into the solar system funded. Talked about China a little bit. This is Chang'e 6. It landed on the far side of the moon, something the United States has never done. And it brought samples back to Earth robotically, something the United States has never done. This picture was taken by its own rover. China is very interested in the economic possibilities of the moon. I mentioned they want to put humans there by 2030, create an exclusive economic zone that benefits them. There are military implications as well. I mentioned the South China Sea. Some of the Chinese activities in Antarctica are also casting doubt on their willingness to abide by international norms and regulations and that sort of thing. So it is a concern, I think, to the State Department. Then here's India. Here's India's Vikram lander, photographed by its own rover. It landed at the South Pole of the moon. Incredible accomplishment. They are shifting, says the Council on Foreign Relations, from socioeconomic development to prestige and national security priorities. This would be an example of that shift. They do have a less ambitious program than China. The funding level is much lower, but they're still doing advanced stuff like this. They also have a Mars orbiter that's sending back data and photography. This does seem like India's interest in space seems like a real opportunity for international partnerships, and by gosh, we have one. This is called the NASA ISRO. ISRO is the Indian Space Research Organization, their NASA, synthetic aperture radar. So that's a 40-foot diameter antenna that can map the surface of the Earth and its changes with unmatched precision. glacier retreats and advances, continental tectonic plate shifts and that sort of thing. And this is in orbit right now. It was launched not that long ago. Ugly things can happen in space if people are not acting responsibly. This is a diagram of a Chinese anti-satellite mission that was flown in 2007. Truth in Advertising, the United States tested an anti-satellite rocket in the 1980s, but we have none in our arsenal. It was just a one-time test, realized. It was a terrible idea. For some reason, the Chinese didn't realize that it was a terrible idea, and they created thousands of pieces of debris that are still up there, because there's nothing to bring them down. And it was a huge embarrassment to China, particularly the foreign ministry. When they were questioned about this, why did they do this? The foreign minister said, "What are you talking about?" The PLA forgot to tell them they were going to do this. And then India did it in 2019. And then Russia did it in 2021. The International Space Station has had to dodge debris from the Russian test many times because it was done at a bad altitude. Let me just say it that way. And bad things might not even be done by nation states. So I worked with two authors to help them write this book on space piracy. So imagine drug cartels, which now have funding as large as many nations, deciding that they want to, put some leverage on some of these space companies and resource companies and that sort of thing. And you could even imagine bad actor nations issuing letters of marque to some non-national actor to give them 1 degree of deniability while malicious activities are going on in space. These are both military and diplomatic challenges that we just have to pay careful attention to going forward. We can also do very good things for the Earth in space. I mean, I already mentioned the tremendous benefits that we get from today's activities. What if we could bring energy down to the Earth's surface from space? Is that my first on? Oh, it's not, darn it. Try to think of the time when you were looking at an object that was a mile away. Maybe you were out on your powerboat in Chesapeake and you were looking at the bridge. Or you were up on a hilltop and you were looking at the next hill that was maybe a mile away. The white disk in the center is 1 mile across. And this umbrella of reflectors is 3 or 4 miles across. This is a huge object. It can produce about as much power as Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant. There's no clouds in space, there's no nighttime in space, so this is 100% available. No greenhouse gases, no radioactive waste, no environmental damage. Oh, but what if a bird flies through the beam? The intensity of the beam is about 1/10 of sunlight. So it has essentially 0 impact on biological systems. And some of the nations that could benefit the most from this, the developing nations, are near the equator, which is where this system would be the most effective. So developed nations could actually provide enormous increases to the quality of life in some of the equatorial nations by building and establishing this capability. And the word from your sponsor, this has to be put together with robots. It's way too big for anything else. So these are the takeaways. Is space cool?
Yes.
Many more missions and many more players have developed over the last 60 years, are developing, and I think it's kind of obvious, it's international. I mean, the agreements, the concerns, the interactions, the conflicts, tremendous economic potential, both from orbiting around the Earth, where our demand for communications keeps getting larger and larger, and space is providing an increasing fraction of all that broadband demand. The economic potential of the moon we've talked about as well. The workforce, as we expand into the solar system, is obviously going to be robotic. Right? You're not going to have Harrison Schmidt out there with a shovel putting that regolith on that lunar habitat, right? It's going to be done with robots. And there are hundreds and thousands of tasks involving construction and maintenance and observation and all these other kind of things that will have to be done by robots. And I'm a little annoyed at NASA that they haven't invested enough in that. And then the last point that I think I made is we must avoid space war. It is possible to make space unusable with enough of these anti-satellite kind of activities. That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you all very much. 1 minute to spare.
Well done, sir.